In this video, you're going to learn how to deploy a Node.js and React app to Heroku. So this is the application that we're going to be deploying today. This is actually the application for my brand new course on how to build a SaaS product, where I walk you through all of the different steps required in order to build this Instagram style app. It also has authentication, payments, emails, everything that you need to know. It's 25 hours of content. So if you're interested in getting that course, I'll put a link down in the description below. Or alternatively, of course, you can use your own application. These steps are going to apply if you're using Node.js or React. So let's get straight into the tutorial. So today we're going to be deploying our app to Heroku, and I'm going to walk you through step by step how we do this. And we're going to do this by setting up a pipeline with both staging and production environments. So the first thing I want to do is head over to heroku.com, and you will need to create an account. And then when you sign into your dashboard, you're going to see all of your different applications. I've got quite a lot of them running here because I've been using Heroku for many years. And personally, I think it's one of the best platforms because it's so easy compared to, say, AWS, where we have a lot of options and things that we have to configure. Heroku is kind of just deploy it and it will work. Well, I say that now. Let's see how that pans out today. So the first thing I want to do is go over here to the right hand side, click new, and then create a new pipeline. So we're going to create a pipeline with both staging and production environments. And just if you're not familiar with what these mean, staging is basically an environment that's very close to production that we can use for production like testing. So when we're writing the code on our local machine, we're running in a development environment. We could just deploy straight to production, but with a staging environment, this lets us get real users, teammates, friends, family, whatever, to test out the application without affecting the production ready application. Then once we're happy with everything on staging, we can push to production, and that's just one button click on Heroku. I would recommend when you're using staging to use things like the live Stripe test keys, so you can actually test real card payments, and you want this to simulate a live environment as much as possible. However, we are going to use separate databases because we don't want to mix staging data with our live production database. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a pipeline, and this is where we're going to have our two environments. So let's just call this Gravity Photo. So we've already got a repo set up for this. So I'm going to search, and then there we go. There is my photo dev repo. So I'm going to connect that GitHub repo so that because we can deploy directly from GitHub. Then I'm going to create pipeline. Okay, so now we have our pipeline set up and we have two spaces for our staging and production app. So what I'm going to do is create two apps. So we need to create a new app. It's going to be Gravity Photo, and then we'll just call this staging. And then we'll create a new app. Select a region. I'll put mine in Europe, but you can put it wherever you prefer. So let's create the app, and then I'm going to create another app called Gravity Production, and then we'll just do the same thing again, create a new app, put mine in Europe. Okay, so now we have two applications set up in our pipeline for staging and production. So let's go ahead and configure our staging application. What we actually need to do first is we need to go into settings here in this application. So you can down here to reveal config vars, we will see our environment variables. So while we have been building our application, we have been using this env file here to store all of our environment variables. This only works on localhost, so whenever we actually deploy our application, we need to put these keys in here. So what I'm actually going to do now is go through and populate the keys that we have on our local machine and put them here on Heroku. And this is basically just a laborious process of copying and pasting these across. The ones that I don't want to put across are the database, because we're going to create a separate database for this Heroku instance. Okay, so I've populated my environment variables. I haven't populated the sensitive ones, but let me just walk through these quickly with you because there's a few notes here. So first one, client URL on our local machine in development mode, we just had HTTP, but now we're running on Heroku, we can use HTTPS. Token secret and crypto secret, I would recommend generating different ones to you're using in development and production mode, and also whenever we come to configuring our production app, I would suggest generating new ones here. So just generate a random 32 or 64 character string for this. These other variables I've just copied across. Domain, we just want to set it to the domain of the app. If you actually go up here and click open app, it will open our Heroku app here, and we've got the domain. So I'm just going to put that into the domain variable. And then we have our avatar API. And of course, if you were using any other external APIs or API keys, you would put them all in here and populate these environment variables. So I'm just going to pop the rest of these missing ones in here. I can't show it on the screen. Basically, you will just populate your Stripe key, your Mail.gun API key, and any other keys that you need in here. Okay, so that is our staging app configured. We do need to do this all again for our production app. So if we just go up here, we can actually switch to the production app here, and then we can go to settings, and then we can reveal our config vars, and then basically we can put all the same things in again. You will want to change some of these. For example, you don't want to use your Stripe test key here. You absolutely want to make sure this is the live key, because you want to capture live payments on your production app. You don't want to be capturing test payments. Absolutely not. So I'm just going to pop the rest of these keys in here. Okay, so that's the environment variables in. I should say also you need to set the node environment variable here as well. So in our production app, we're going to set this to production. And then in our staging app, we're going to set it to staging. Okay, so that's the environment variables set up. The next thing we need to do is configure two databases for these apps. So let's go to staging first. And then what we can do is if we go to the resources tab and then we go to add-ons, we search for ClearDB. For this, I'm going to use MySQL. There is also Postgres on Heroku as well. You can also use an external database if you prefer. I actually like using the MySQL service on DigitalOcean, but it doesn't really matter where your database is hosted. The steps for this are going to be the same, but just for convenience, I'm going to use ClearDB on Heroku. So we want to go to add-on, select the free plan, and then submit order form. That will add a database to our application. Okay, it's been installed. And then what we can do then is if we go into settings, and then down here, you'll actually see the ClearDB URL here. So if we copy that, put it in here, you will see we've got the username here, username and password. The host is here, and then the database name is here. What we actually want to do is we need to migrate those databases. And the easiest way to do this is just to connect to it from our local instance. And then we can run the connects migrate. It will populate the tables for those databases. So what I'm going to do is just going to copy this, go over to my mval on localhost, and then we can just pick these out. So database host is then this here, and then the name of the database is here. Port for Heroku is 3306. So that's our staging database. Then I can just jump over here, and then we can do connects migrate latest. Okay, so that's our database. That's our staging database created. So what I would then do is do the same thing again on production. I know this is a bit laborious, but we want to go into resources. We want to add another database, and then we want to do the exactly same thing again. We want to go into settings, reveal config vars. We want to get the database URL, and then we want to copy these into our M file, and then we want to run connects migrate latest again. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so that's my production database set up and migrated now. So the next thing that I want to do is jump back over to Heroku, and then we need to take these variables and split them out into our mvars. So it's the same way we have on localhost. So we're going to have db user. So I'm going to take this, and then we're going to do this, and then I'm going to add, and then the next thing we're going to do db password. Do the same thing again. So we're just going to copy this password, pop that in there, and then we're going to get the db. We're going to get the host here. So this is going to be db host. We need db name, which is this, and then finally we want db port. Actually, not finally. So we want db port 3306, default MySQL port. And then we want db client, MySQL 2. So I've done this on production. We need to do exactly the same thing on the staging application as well. Okay, so I've populated these on staging as well. Make sure you absolutely do this for both databases, otherwise this isn't going to work. So the final thing we need to do for our database is download the certificates. So if we go back over to resources, so we click on ClearDB, it'll open up a new tab with the ClearDB dashboard. Okay, and then if we click on the security tab, you can see we have 3 certificates here. So what I'm going to do is download each of these, and I'm going to put them into a folder in the application. So let's call the folder certs, and then we're going to download each of these. So the first one is the certificate. So, and then we've got the client certificate, and then we've also got the key. So what we want to do is just call this, let's call it staging-ca, and then we'll call this one staging-cert, and then we'll call this one staging key. So we have the certificates downloaded into a folder, and then you know what I'm going to say next. We need to go and do the exact same thing in our production app. Go into resources, ClearDB, security, and then download these certificates. But this time, let's call it prod-ca, and then we'll call this one prod cert, and then we'll call this one prod key. This is going to ensure that our database connection is connected over SSL and is secure. So we can close this down, and then what we want to do is jump back and go into our connects file, and we need to modify our connects file here to use these certificates. So what I'm going to do is do const fs equals require. I'm going to do require fs because you need to read these certificates from the folder here. So what we want to do then is we've got different environments here. So we've got our test environment, we've got our development environment. We want to create a new environment called staging, because we don't want to use the certificates in development because we're just connecting locally on our machine, so we don't need to. But in staging and production, we do want to modify this SSL object. So we do want to reject unauthorized true. And then what we can do is we can do CA. These are the keys that we need. We need CA, we need cert, and we need key. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do fs read file sync, and then we want to read certs, and then it's going to be staging.ca.cert, and then cert is going to be same thing, read file sync, and it's going to be certs slash staging.cert.cer. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this again. So here we can do, this time it's going to be staging key. And then we can just copy this. Actually, let's copy this whole object. And then we do the same thing for production here. Only this time we change these to PRD, PRD, PRD. So that's our certificates set up for our database connection on staging and production. What we need to do next is open up our server file, and there's a few things that we need to tweak here. So what I'm going to do here is import path, and then we need to go down to the very bottom here. What we're going to do here is we're going to serve our static React files, because when we deploy to Heroku, Heroku is going to build the React files. When we're in development mode on our laptop, we're basically running React in development mode, and it's quite slow. But what we actually want to do when we deploy is build the static files and serve these as well. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to do if process env.nodeenv equals staging, or process env.nodeenv equals production. Because you only want to do this in staging and production. We absolutely do not want to serve the built files when we're in development mode on our local machine. So what I'm going to do here is app use, and then we do express static path join, and then underscore directory name, and then it's going to be client/build. So let's serve the client build folder, which is where whenever we build the application inside client, we will get a folder called build. Then we want to do app get everything. Then we can do rec res, check that. Then in here we can do res send file path join underscore directory name plus client build index.html. Okay, so that will serve our static React files in either staging or production environments. So what we need to do now is, if we want to go into our client folder, go into source and settings. So where this is going to get tricky is in our node environment, we can have any node environment we want. We can have development, staging, and production, which is what we want. However, in React, there's only two modes. There's development and production. And basically the way it works is if we're running React in development mode, it's going to be, the node environment is going to be set to development. When we build the static files, the development environment is automatically going to be set by React to production. At the moment, we cannot have another object for staging with a different URL. So what we're actually going to do is get rid of these URLs completely. And then we're just going to use a dynamic URL because we're deploying our application to one Heroku dyno. The client and server are both going onto the same app. So we can actually just access the server from the client using a dynamic domain. If you want to deploy onto different Heroku apps, or you want to deploy your client elsewhere and want your server on Heroku, then what you would need to do is you would need to use there is a variable in React that you can use. I'll put a link down in the description below. Instead of using nodeenv, you could then create the staging object, and then you would just have to update any references to nodeenv in the React app to your custom React environment variable. But because we're deploying onto one Heroku instance, we don't really need to worry about this. So I'm just going to get rid of this URL entirely. One other thing I'm going to do while we're here is populate our Stripe API key. So you're going to put the live key in here so we can take real card payments in production mode, which obviously we want to do. We don't want to be presenting our customers with a test card input. So what I want to do now then is open up our app file. So here we're setting the base URL to settings, process nodeenv server URL. So I actually just want to change this. We're going to use a dynamic URL. So what I can do is const lock equals window location. So let's get the location where the app is running, and then what we can do is we can set the domain to lock protocol, which is going to be HTTPS or HTTP, depending if we're on localhost or if we're on Heroku. And then I'm going to do lock host name. So let's use the dynamic host name. And then I also want to do if lock host name equals localhost. So if we're on localhost, append the port because we need the port on localhost, but on Heroku we do not. So I'm going to set the base URL to wherever the application is running. So the same protocol, the host name, and then if it's localhost, let's add on the port at the end. If not, then just leave it as the domain because we don't need to specify the port when we're accessing Heroku. So that's our app configured with a dynamic API domain. What we need to do then is go down into our config folder, change our production domain to be our production app. So of course you will probably have your own domain on it. For this, you're not going to use the default Heroku domain. So let's do that. Let's also create one for staging. So I'm just going to copy this and then we'll paste the staging. And of course you could put any other properties or config in here that you want for your own particular application. So you just need to have one that matches the environment name. So that's that. While we're here, if you do want to use your own custom domain, if you go into the Heroku app settings and then go down to domains and then add domain, put in your domain, it will give you the a name record to add in your domain control panel. Okay, so that's that. The final thing we need to do now then is go into our package JSON, and we need to add the Heroku post build command. So it's Heroku-post build, and we're basically just going to instruct Heroku to build the client application whenever we deploy. So it's going to be npm install and npm run build. So whenever we deploy, go into the client folder, install the packages, and then build the application. So that is our application configured for deployment. What I'm going to do then is just commit the changes. So git add, and then we'll just do deploy, and then we'll just do git push. So when we go back to Heroku and we go into our staging environment, because we've already connected our GitHub repo. We can deploy the branch here, and we can also enable automatic deploys. So every time we push a change, it's going to rebuild our application. And then if we go down to view build log here, we can actually track the build process. So this is going to take a minute to build the application. Okay, so our application has now finished building. So when we hit this open app button, we should see our shiny new app. So let's open it up. There we go. Our application is working. Now, if I try to sign in, I should get an error message because we haven't actually created an account yet because this is on a separate database. Okay, so it looks like our API call is working. So let me try and create an account. Make sure everything's working okay. Okay, looks like it is. Let's go into the free plan. Okay, so our application is deployed and it's working. We do have some issues. So you can see here we have some CSP errors. So what I want to do is show you how to debug these, because content security policy is quite tricky. You can't test it on localhost. It's only when you set it on these, it's only when you deploy your application, you're going to get these error messages. So you can see refuse to load the style sheet because it violates the following policy: style, source, self. Actually, the issue here is I've got 3 O's in Google, and we're trying to load this. We're trying to load these fonts from Google, and that's why you can see that these fonts are not actually loading in the application. So what we want to do is we want to go back to server, and we want to go into our style sheet here, and then we want to fix this. So we want to change that so that we was typo here. So we want to load these files from Google APIs. Let's make sure everything else is working okay. So is our avatar working? Yes. Let me try and upload a custom avatar to S3 to make sure our S3 CSP policy is working. Okay, so put a photo in here. Let's save it. Okay, so it's not working. Refuse to load the image. We've got another issue here because it violates image source. So if we go back here, you'll actually see that it's because I have a type. This should not be a dash. This should be a dot. Okay, and we also want to then change this cores thing to be domain. I originally called this production domain, but on Heroku I've changed it to domain. So let's just change that to be domain. So that should fix our issues. Let me just recommit these changes, then fix CSP errors, and then we're just going to do git push, and that will push to GitHub. Now, because we've enabled automatic deploys, we should get it should automatically deploy these changes. If I go into overview, you can see, yeah, the application is building. So this will go through the build process again and hopefully fix those 2 issues. While this is building, I should note that you will also need to configure your Stripe webhook. Remember, we did this for the local host, but in staging and production, you will need to go into Stripe, into developers, add endpoint. Then you will need to put in the endpoint URL here, and also it's going to give you the secret, and you'll need to make sure that you put that into your settings and then the config vars. Same way, similar to what we did for localhost, to make sure your Stripe webhooks are going to work on your production application and your staging application. Okay, so it looks like our app has built this time. Whenever this is finished, we can reload the app and we can check and see if our changes have fixed the application. And now you've also seen how to deploy changes to your application. So we just change the code, we commit it to our GitHub repo. It's going to get pushed automatically into our staging application. So there we go. The application is finished. Let's open it up and see if it works. Yep, so it looks like our fonts are now loading. So our content security policy is working with no errors in the console. Let's go into account profile, and then we should see there's the avatar working. So we know that the avatar is working on S3. Whenever we actually upload some photos to our profile, we know that that content security policy is going to work also. So the final thing we need to do then is, we know our application is working, everything is good. We could do some testing and staging. We could invite some people to try it out. The final thing we'd want to do then is push our app into production mode. So in Heroku, we just go to the pipeline and then we hit the promote to production button. And then this will push our application into production. And then we can just test that works. So I'm going to open the app, and this time it's going to open up our production app. So if I try and sign in, should get an error message because remember, this is on a different database. Please enter the correct login details. So that account doesn't exist. I can then create a new separate account in production mode. So cal usegravity.app. And then we'll create a new account. Yeah, so like this. We go into Stripe card. So just test that, because I'm saying postcode, I know that this is actually in live mode, because test mode asks for the zip file, the zip address. So we know our Stripe live key is working. So that's our application deployed. Let's just quickly recap on what we've just done. So we created a staging and production. We created both staging and production environments. We connected our GitHub repo to the staging app. When we deploy the changes to the application, we're deploying that application to Heroku. We can test it out on staging. We can do some testing. Then when we're happy, we can just push our changes to our production application. Okay, hopefully that was not too complicated for you, and I hope you can get your application deployed without too many problems. And I will look forward to seeing you in the next video.